Ladies and gentlemen, Fourth and Trollers, welcome back to Fourth and Troll Fantasy, the most entertaining fantasy football podcast on the planet. My name is Noah Selby.
And I'm Wes Selby.
And we have officially arrived, people. It is Fantasy Championship Weekend. Fantasy Championship Weekend for most of us. Some leagues run until week 18. I'm not in any of those leagues, but some leagues run until week 18. For most of us here, it is Fantasy Championship Weekend, which is a very exciting thing, but carries a little bit of a sad thing with it. Is that means this season of Fourth and Troll Fantasy is almost to the end.
Oh.
Wes, how are you doing, man? Look where we've come to, where we've arrived. What's going on?
I mean, just first and foremost, I'm feeling gratitude along with the sorrow. It's bittersweet. It is, really, I'm going to enjoy the rest. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to enjoy taking some time off and having to write try to keep track of every little bit of news that goes on to help and all the statistics and numbers and data that we try to provide each and every episode to do the best that we can. But I'm also, this has been wonderful. This has been a great first run, I feel. Thank you, everyone that's listened. We've got another episode for sure coming out on Tuesday to recap the championship weekend. But this has been great. And it is genuinely a little sad that it is coming to a close of the first season. But I will say, because I mentioned I am in one championship game. I'm trying to compete for a money league in first place. I played against the Cowboys defense. I'm a little relieved that's all they did because, wow, it could have been so much worse. So off to I can survive off of what happened last night. So that's what happened for me. Noah, how are you feeling? As we close, this is our last show following a Thursday night football game.
Oh man. Well, I'm thrilled for those to be over this year.
They've been so bad.
For one thing, it was honestly hilarious and adorable trying to listen to Al and Kirk express their gratitude for their jobs this year. Because I'm sure they're very grateful for their jobs and they love what they get to do. But man, they sat through some games, man. That was tough for them this year. Yeah. It was funny to hear them talk about that. But it's coming to a close. It's exciting. It's, I echo what you say. All the gratitude and love that we've gotten and support has been so great. I also echo what you're saying about a little bit of a break, a little bit of rest. This has been, this is something that you and I, started doing, not as, a full-time job or anything like that, or any monetization or anything like that. This was just something that we love and we love talking about. And we figured, maybe other people like hearing us talk about this and a lot of you have. And so it's been really, really cool to hear you guys, and see you guys support and give feedback and leave reviews and all that sort of stuff. It is super, super exciting. We're super, super grateful for the support. So grateful, in fact, that Wes, I'm going to go off the cuff here with you real quick.
Let's do it, buddy.
One of our great supporters, great listeners, is very, very active and reaching out to us with any questions he may have. His name is Anthony, and he hit me with a question that I wanted to answer on the show. So I want to ask you. He's between one player this week in this championship matchup. He's between Isaiah Pacheco versus the Denver Broncos or Brian Robinson Jr. against the Cleveland Browns. Wes, if you're in Anthony's situation, what are you doing this week to hopefully win yourself a championship?
I think that's a good question just because there is still some interest in Isaiah Pacheco, even though Jerick McKinnon has been a fantasy football playoff prodigy so far. And I can understand after seeing what Cam Akers did out of nowhere to the Broncos defense that you would think, well, maybe just the Broncos have fallen apart. Totally.
Right.
However, a little spoiler for the news, Antonio Gibson's likely not going to play. And I think the Commanders are going to try and pull off everything they can because they are clinging on to that last wild card spot for dear life. So for me personally, I like Brian Robinson. He is a bell cow. He can handle 20 carries in a game. And I do think that he is a better running back than Isaiah Pacheco. So that's my take. How do you feel, Noah?
No, I agree with you. Before that Antonio Gibson news, I probably would have said Pacheco just because of, I mean, maybe it's recency bias, but seems like you can run against the Broncos. So
Suddenly
that was something that I probably would have said Pacheco before that. But since then, and hearing this Antonio Gibson news and knowing this, there's no JD McKissick to take these targets, and Brian Robinson Jr. has started to run more routes. Carson Wentz maybe is going to play a little more conservative. Who knows? I'm on board here actually with Brian Robinson Jr. Given the information that we have now. So Anthony, there you go. I know he's going to listen to this bright and early Friday morning and get a little insight on the show here. So wanted to go off the cuff there, Wes, real quick, but let's jump into things because we do have a great show today to kick off what is going to be a wild championship week in fantasy football. We've got a great show. We're going to, kind of outline what we watched in like a weirdly competitive Thursday night football game, Cowboys at Titans. And then we're going to do one final studs and duds for this season. But first, Wes, let's hear the last ever news segment for season 1 of Fourth and Troll Fantasy. Wes, hit us with all the information we need to know going into championship weekend.
Oh my gosh, the last time. Oh, I hope you don't mind my voice because I'm going to do the best I can to entertain you with the last bit of news here. So first things first, I just want to give some clarity because we didn't mention anything about Derrick Henry or Tony Pollard last episode for their injuries. This news just kind of happened almost immediately after we released our episode on Tuesday. So we didn't have that information. Otherwise, of course, we would have shared it. Just want to explain that. But also, hopefully, you're responsible fantasy football managers. You're listening to a fantasy podcast. Of course, you care about your lineup. So we just trust that you took care of that. And then also, as you probably were made aware of, just hours before kickoff, the Titans decided, you know what? We're going to bench Malik Willis and we're going to start Josh Dobbs. So anyway, just want to clear that up.
For those Malik Willis owners out there,
real heartbroken, like, oh no, I'm checking time. No, I've only thrown.
I know you're all competing.
Touchdowns.
I know you're all competing for your fantasy championship with Malik Willis in your starting lineup. So
the most common quarterback in all championship teams.
90% of leagues. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. So just to explain that in case you were like, wait a minute, I didn't hear that. All right. So here we go. Last news of the season. So first things first, just some big NFL news that was announced. JJ Watt is going to retire this season. One of the best edge rushers of all time. Just some important NFL news, just sharing that with everybody. Okay. Hey, some more big NFL news. And this is really freaking ridiculous. Okay. So I'm sure everybody's heard this by now, but here's all the details. The Raiders are going to bench Derek Carr this week and will start Jarrett Stidham against the 49ers. The Raiders specifically chose, reportedly, a mutual decision to send Derek Carr home so he wouldn't be a, quote, distraction, end quote, these last 2 weeks of the season. Perhaps, though, we've already seen the last game with Derek Carr for the Raiders, as there have also been rumors that the Raiders chose to send him home to make sure he's as healthy as can be, to preserve his health for a trade when the offseason begins. Okay. Jarrett Stidham, for those who are interested, is a 2019 fourth-round draft pick from Auburn, drafted by the New England Patriots, and was Tom Brady's backup, Brady's last year there in New England. Now, Stidham had a respectable collegiate career, but the biggest factor, of course, in the fantasy football world is how much this will affect Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, and Darren Waller for what just happens to be the final week of the playoff. I know Davante Adams has been a complete letdown in the fantasy playoffs, but just imagine, if you will, if you are in the championship, you have Davante Adams, and you have someone starting for their first time, you might get a single-digit game. I don't know. This is huge. Anyway, hey, even more big news. The Dolphins will, in fact, start Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback while Tua Tagovailoa will remain in the concussion protocol. Now, as we kind of alluded to in the previous episode, with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as the wide receivers, there's still a strong possibility that Teddy Bridgewater can finish as a top 10 quarterback this week. If you're looking to fill a position for someone like Jalen Hurts or any of the other quarterbacks, I can't remember who will be out for this week. So there's that opportunity there. Okay, still some more big NFL news. This is quite a way to finish out the last news segment of this season. Last episode, we mentioned the Commanders. Head coach Ron Rivera was deciding which quarterback to start. He's made the decision. As Noah mentioned, as we talked about with the Commanders, Carson Wentz is officially the starter. Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel all found some really great fantasy success with Wentz, despite Wentz's, well-documented recklessness. However, as we also mentioned in Anthony's question, Antonio Gibson has missed practice all week long, making Brian Robinson likely to have the backfield all to himself come this Sunday. So, in case there was anyone else wondering specificities on the Commander situation, that is everything. Okay. Not as big news, but still some big news. Cliff Kingsbury confirmed that Colt McCoy will start on Sunday, having cleared his concussion protocol. And oh boy, do we pray that this redeems DeAndre Hopkins' vacant stat line the past 2 weeks with Trace McSorley. Hopefully this redeems everything. Hopefully on the flip side too, it doesn't take away from the surprising success from James Conner as well. All right, Jalen Hurts did practice on Thursday. However, it is still worth having a backup in case they choose to sit him, but he's moving in the right direction. It's important to know that there are reports that he's only at practice just to keep the chemistry with the Eagles' first team in case he does play week 18, which would also be ridiculous because they don't need to fight for anything for the playoffs. They've almost won the division as long as they win one of these last 2 games. So don't trust that news so much that Hurts is back in practice and he's ready to go. The saddest news I feel in this whole report is that Lamar Jackson didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, leading us to believe that Lamar Jackson will miss this final game of the fantasy football season, making that 4 straight weeks, including all of the fantasy playoffs. That just blows. Just a quick side note here for Aaron Rodgers. Reportedly, he banged up his knee on Christmas Day against the Miami Dolphins. He didn't practice on Wednesday, but had a rest day mostly because of it. And there was also no limitation in his practice reps on Thursday. So he's still very likely to start against Minnesota in case anyone is still thinking about, Aaron Jones or someone like that. Tyler Lockett, remember Thursday night a couple of weeks ago against the 49ers, had a broken hand. He returned to practice this week, but it's still not certain if he will be ready in time for Sundays. We talked about last episode. Pete Carroll said he looks good, but it's still up in the air. Tough to figure out if that's going to be a game time decision. Just plan accordingly in your lineups. Once again, Jamal Williams is back on the news segment. He returned to practice on Wednesday after hurting his foot against the Carolina Panthers. This does put him in line to play on Sunday, but again, we get it if you're not going to start him because that's been 3 straight weeks below 4 points. So that's tough to overlook still, even though he has so many touchdowns. Okay, back to the Packers with Aaron Rodgers. Hey, so Christian Watson missed Wednesday and Thursday's practice. This makes it pretty unlikely that he's going to be in line to play against the Vikings. Romeo Dobbs, I don't know if you care about any of the other Packers receivers, but if that does influence anybody's decision, Christian Watson will probably not be playing. Last few here, Damian Harris missed practice on Thursday, which is probably a sign that Ramondre Stevenson owners are going to probably have the backfield all to himself. And they're playing against the Miami Dolphins, who, as we know, has not had a solid rush defense. They have improved, but Stevenson has been such a beast all season. It's kind of hard to even care how good the other defense is. Miles Sanders has been a non-participant in practice this week. kind of came as a surprise, a sudden knee injury. It's entirely plausible that Miles Sanders just misses this week. Again, as we talked about, they are the first seed currently in the NFC. So despite how he may feel, how he might be looking, they could just bench Miles Sanders and give the starting role to Kenneth Gainwell. In case any of you are trying to find an interesting fill, Kenneth Gainwell is pretty decent backup. Tough for a championship decision. I wouldn't do it that way, but just something to keep in mind if you do have Miles Sanders in the playoffs. Last couple here, hang tight. Alvin Kamara wasn't spotted in any of the open media portions of practice this week. That doesn't necessarily mean he is likely going to miss or he's doubtful or questionable, but just keep an eye on that as we finish up this Friday day and then the rest of Saturday to see if Alvin Kamara is going to be ready to play this last week of fantasy. Brandon Cooks didn't practice on Thursday for non-injury reasons. Whatever that means, that would likely make Chris Moore still the top wide receiver in Houston. And with or without Cooks, who knows? Because as we know, Brandon Cooks has had a sticky relationship with the Houston Texans this season. So it's not even, we don't know what that means. Just throwing that out there in case anybody liked what they saw with Cooks having that touchdown last week and how good Chris Moore has been this last few weeks as well. Okay, last three here. Broncos tight end Greg Dulcich, Noah's savior, is questionable against the Chiefs with a hamstring injury. If you really want to know, I'll tell you who the other tight end is. His name is Eric Saubert. That's the backup tight end. Or you can just stream another tight end because it's the Broncos. Okay, last 2 year. Deebo Samuel returned to practice on Thursday. That does not mean he's going to start. So don't hold your breath on that being a strong possibility because, again, the 49ers have clinched the division and he is going to be a game time decision at best. You may see that he has projected points. Do not buy into that too deeply because, again, they've won the division already. The worst they can do is be the third seed. Why would they start Deebo Samuel? I'm not sure. Maybe they just want him back with that first team. Who knows? But if you are going to risk it, you are going to slot him into your lineup. Remember this. They are the late window game on Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. And if you are going to risk that, if it is a game time decision, just make sure that you have someone at that same time or playing Sunday night or even Monday night to fill in so that you don't end up having a complete goose egg and possibly your championship game. Last one here, just a little bit of defensive news because, you know, it helps to know that someone as talented as Joey Bosa has been designated to return from the IR. Not a guarantee, as we've learned from Dallas Goedert, not a guarantee he's going to play, but in case that persuades you on starting the Chargers defense after having 3 interceptions against Nick Foles and now playing the Rams, who at one point was a gimme, but suddenly just throws up 51 points against what was a fantastic Broncos defense. Just sharing that for anybody that is interested in streaming a defense for this last week. This concludes the last official news segment of the season. Hey, we hope that this news segment helped you get ahead of the curve with trades throughout the season, coaching updates, and injuries. Really appreciate you listening to all that every start of the episode. And now, hey, let's just jump into the last Thursday night football of this season between the Cowboys, the Titans. And in my opinion, Noah, just should have been a complete blowout, but somehow the Cowboys, in a way, barely beat the Titans after all their injuries. So let's jump into this, man.
Yeah, I mean, let's because when you have Micah Parsons on your team and like Josh Dobbs is the opposing quarterback, like you should probably have like 6 or 7 sacks a game at that point. And this was a lot closer of a game than I think it should have been. I mean, it was another Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime Video game. It was boring and not exciting to watch unless you're a Dalton Schultz owner. Let's go.
Oh my gosh.
Come on.
17 weeks too late.
Listen, I've said it. Travis Kelce is the only tight end to have. That's it. That's all you can do. That's it. 101 next year, Travis Kelce. But no, so yeah, I mean, I feel like this was more of a telling for kind of next season, kind of telling game about the current state of the Cowboys kind of game, not much to take away from the Titans in this game, Wes. I mean, it's great. Robert Woods had a game. Nice. Like we're all like value of the season. Robert Woods. Can't believe Robert Woods is going in double-digit rounds. Like blah blah blah. All this stuff.
Right.
I think this is probably a season high game at 14.9 points. I can't confirm that, but my goodness,
I'm going to. Well,
I'll just I mean, there's not much to take away here. One thing I will take away, and it's something I've been thinking about for a little bit and been saying for a little bit, and I may not have said it on the podcast, but I've been saying it I believe I've been saying it to you, Wes. I've been saying it in our fantasy group chat. I've been saying to a few people here. Dak Prescott isn't what he used to be. When we think about Dak Prescott, at least in terms of fantasy football, I think back to 2 years ago when it was like, oh man, like Dak Prescott is, throwing for 350, 400 yards a game and 3 touchdowns and is scoring 25 plus fantasy points. He has this incredible floor, all this stuff. He's a great weapon for fantasy football. He's a great underrated quarterback to have in fantasy football. And that's not the case anymore. It isn't. I'm not sure exactly if it was the broken leg that's setting him back a little bit, but in my eyes, the way I'm viewing this, Dak Prescott for the Dallas Cowboys is like a game manager at best for this team. He makes decisions sometimes that don't feel like they're the best decisions to make. Am I crazy in this?
I understand what you mean and what feels like sort of a regression, because I think at some point in our perception of Dak Prescott, we got this idea that accustomed in some way to him having regularly 300-yard games and multiple touchdowns. And the multiple touchdowns is certainly a regular occurrence. But looking at Dak Prescott's fantasy season, he has had a lot of interceptions. And in fact,
I'll tell you, he's tied for the league lead in interceptions.
Yeah.
With 14.
6 straight games with an interception. 6 straight games with interception. And most of them are multiple interceptions. Plus, he fumbled last night. And that wasn't like someone just came behind. Like, he just muffed the snap. And when you subtract those points from him having regularly 250 plus yards and 1 or 2 touchdowns, sometimes 3, you just end up getting, once again, as last night, 14 points. Yeah. So he's no longer a fantasy football quarterback. He's just successful, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, like I'm thinking about next year and I'm going, okay, what quarterback rankings, just thinking about it right now. I'm like, I think I'll have Jared Goff ranked higher than Dak Prescott this upcoming season. Like unless the Lions go out and draft somebody and it's clear that he's going to be the day one starter, but I don't know. Dan Campbell loves Jared Goff and Jared Goff does good things. I mean, I don't know, like maybe Kirk Cousins is going to be higher than Dak Prescott. And that's not something that we're used to talking about and we're used to dealing with. I don't know. It feels off. Like I said, he's tied for the league lead in interceptions with 14 on the season, and he's missed 5 games. He's missed 5 games, and he's tied for the lead in interceptions in the league. It's just like it feels like I said it to you or to somebody. I believe it maybe to their fantasy group or whoever it was, but it was like first drive of the game, they're throwing it's maybe like a play action something, and CeeDee Lamb's kind of running a route behind the line of scrimmage across and stuff like that. And CeeDee Lamb kind of gets like checked by the defensive end. And then Dak Prescott's like looking downfield and then like without even really taking much time to look, goes to throw to CeeDee Lamb in the flat. And the defensive end is like right there and nearly like gets a full hand on it. And if he's maybe a little more acrobatic or athletic, like intercepts that, and that's a pick 6. Like, and that's exactly how last week against the Eagles started, was with Dak Prescott throwing a pick 6 to the defensive end because he literally just couldn't make a pass to get past a defensive lineman. It's just like something feels off with Dak Prescott since like coming back from the broken leg, but especially this season returning from injury, it's just feels a little strange, feels a little off. I'll tell you what, though, it doesn't affect CeeDee Lamb whatsoever because he's still freaking awesome in fantasy football.
That has been a relief. Especially seeing how great the ground game has been, which just do a quick moment of silence, I think, for Tony Pollard owners for seeing Malik Davis have 8 points without even trying. Just thinking about how great Tony Pollard could have been for this championship game, because I do know a couple teams that have Tony Pollard in their lineup. So just quick moment of silence real quick for them. Okay, too bad.
Okay,
anyway,
great.
CeeDee Lamb owners, I think, just as you're saying, it's so awesome to know that nothing has really affected him. He has been a true number one, top 10 wide receiver. And it was a sluggish start, not the best, especially when Cooper Rush was in, but then he has fulfilled that promise, which has been awesome. And
he's climbing up my boards right now for rankings next year. Even everything I just said about Dak. I don't think the Cowboys will win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott. And no matter how I feel about Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb is still just climbing my boards right now as far as like wide receiver rankings. And I don't know, it's exciting for me, man. I don't know. It's great to see 14 targets, 11 catches, 100 yards. He is like, sometimes it's, touchdown games. Sometimes it's PPR. Sometimes it's, 4 catches for 130 yards or something like that gets you, the points. Something he does it one way or another, and somehow it just ends up happening. It's awesome. I really like CeeDee Lamb, and good to see him having a breakout in a year where he was, allowed to, really, with Amari Cooper gone. So it's good stuff there, and I'm looking forward to next season. CeeDee Lamb is somebody I have my eyes on for sure. We briefly mentioned Dalton Schultz, 24.6 fantasy points, 7 catches, 56 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Listen, it's the highs and the lows. He's given me 0 points this year. He's given me 25 points this year. He's given me 19 points this year. He's given me 8 points this year. Feels like you could fill in the blank. This year, my fantasy tight end was blank, and they gave me all those sorts of weeks.
Yeah.
It's if you started with your fantasy championship, hell yeah. There you go. Great start to your fantasy championship. I had somebody in a loser's bracket that I was playing against who had Dalton Schultz and CeeDee Lamb playing against me. So I am a little bit in the hole here, but good stuff there. T.Y. Hilton is like interesting because I was like, yeah, he's not really going to do much. They have Michael Gallup and Noah Brown and all that stuff. And while 9 points isn't much, CeeDee Lamb looks good. Like, he looks like he didn't take a year off of football pretty much just now. And he looks pretty good. I don't know what they're going to do with him next year, but dude, he looks good.
T.Y. Hilton basically had a game-winning catch against the Eagles last week. I don't know where this T.Y. Hilton came from, but suddenly he feels like a true veteran. And imagine this. Imagine knowing how Odell Beckham Jr. did in the Super Bowl as the clear Super Bowl MVP for the first quarter and a half. And then being told, the Cowboys are going to instead sign T.Y. Hilton for their playoff run. You'd be called crazy. I mean, you think Jerry Jones was insane. He is, but then you look at how great T.Y. Hilton has been, and it's like, they might just keep him for next year. And then that's like, now you got to think about, all right, have we lost value for Michael Gallup and Noah Brown since T.Y. Hilton has been a great third down target for Dak Prescott? I have no idea. We'll have to find that out in the summer. But great. Hey, great pickup, Dallas. I'll give you that one.
Yeah, there you go. One more Dallas Cowboy I want to talk about. And it's kind of a weighted question because, he actually didn't play in this game. But watching Ezekiel Elliott. Have the backfield primarily to himself. He got his chance to prove himself. I know the Titans are a good run defense, but he had 37 yards on 19 carries. And if you started him in your fantasy championship, he saved you with a touchdown from the 1 yard line. They just kind of plunged in. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't anything like that. It wasn't, they
didn't bench him. They didn't pull their starters in the fourth quarter or anything.
Yeah.
He played the full game.
We just watched pretty much another backup to Ezekiel Elliott nearly outplay him, especially in the fantasy football aspect. I mean, and he did outplay him. He didn't score a touchdown. Malik Davis didn't, but Malik Davis had 2 more yards on 9 less carries than Ezekiel Elliott did. So I guess my question here is,
just say it.
You're in
safe space?
No. Do we think Jerry Jones's ignorance is enough to outweigh the fact that they're going to want to Tony Pollard's set to be a free agent. They're going to want to re-sign him. Do we think Jerry Jones's ignorance is weighted enough to essentially they still have a 2-headed backfield and Ezekiel Elliott is still a presence on this team, but Tony Pollard still comes in and does exactly what we know he can do, therefore leading to Tony Pollard's ADP being an absolute steal next year in drafts? Because I'm trying to figure out right now where I can get Tony Pollard next year in drafts.
I think to answer all those questions is Ezekiel Elliott will still be named the RB1, and that will confuse enough people to wonder how Tony Pollard is going to be involved, because this is the potential we've always seen in Tony Pollard. We've seen these breakout 20-point games in the few seasons he's been there, but Ezekiel Elliott has always been a 1,000-yard rusher and has scored a number of touchdowns to still be a top 10 running back each of the last 4 years, except for this season. And now Tony Pollard has kind of proven it consistently this last half of the season. I think they're both going to be, fourth round. But again, you just have to remember that Tony Pollard is still technically not the RB1 for Dallas. So it's I think it will end up benefiting us once again, as Jerry Jones will have some kind of media story about how great Zeke is and feeding him and the kettle drum and all that stuff there in Dallas. So, all right, that's just a prediction. We'll have to find out. But
yeah, I think and hope you're right, Wes. I mean, Wes, how early are you willing to take Tony Pollard next year in drafts?
I'd be willing to take him in the fourth round.
Okay, so I need to be willing to take him in the third round to get him ahead of you. Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to start planning on that now. I'm going to reframe my mind to make sure that I'm okay with that reality. So,
been recorded.
It's been recorded there, because we have a tendency to just we because we talk about fantasy so much, we talk about it, and then we both are pretty like-minded as far as some of these players go, and oh boy, we end up sniping each other a little bit on drafts. So I guess we just got to hope that we're far enough apart in our draft order to that we're both kind of campaigning for and planning for different.
Let's just rig it. Let's fix it so that one of us is number 2 and the other is number 9 or something.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, that's gonna do it for Thursday night, though. Good conversation here. I mean, we can talk about the Titans, but there's not really anything to talk about. I think Josh Dobbs probably starts again next week.
About for the Titans.
Josh Dobbs played better than Malik Willis.
One game that his entire career.
Yeah. So I think Josh Dobbs gets to start next week against Jacksonville to keep their playoff hopes alive. I mean, I don't know. At this point with them, I mean, do you think this was almost just kind of like a wave the white flag kind of thing for Tennessee with Derrick Henry suddenly popping up? I don't know. Like we said, we didn't hear anything about Derrick Henry being hurt all weekend last week. And then he just kind of came out of nowhere. It's like, oh, he's questionable. And then it was like, oh yeah, he's doubtful, Yeah. I mean, I think Mike Vrabel's like, yeah, season's done and we have good players that we don't want to risk getting hurt. So
I think Mike Vrabel is thinking two things. One, there's no way we're going to beat the Cowboys, but there's a possibility we can beat the Jacksonville Jaguars because they're a division rival and anything can happen. And because Derrick Henry has an injury, let's not risk him being hurt for whoever wins this Jacksonville game goes to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Just imagine that. So that's what Mike Vrabel is thinking. Like, it doesn't matter if we lose this. We just have to win next week. Derrick Henry's the only way we're going to win. Malik Willis sucks. So let's see if maybe Josh Dobbs has something to prove. He's going to start whichever quarterback he thinks is better. I think the other thing Mike Vrabel is thinking about, I think he's terrified he's about to get fired. And he's trying to do all he can to salvage a playoff victory in order to remain the Titans head coach, even though they started out great and they're not good right now, of course, but Tannehill's hurt. But I really think Mike Vrabel is acting as if his tenure in Tennessee is closing.
Do you think he thinks he's on the hot seat? Do you think he's on the hot seat?
I think he thinks so. I don't think he should be fired.
I don't think he should either. They were the one seed last year.
Exactly. And I think he feels that way. I mean, it's just the way that he's coached these last 6 games. It feels like he is so tense. The way that, I don't know if you saw the picture of all the coaches. There's a big coaches meeting when, OTAs start and all the head coaches kind of line up. Matt Rule was on that picture during the summer, and his shoulders were so high up because he was so tense. He looked like he was in pain from stress. And then, of course, about 5 games later, he was fired. I think that's what Mike Vrabel was probably experiencing. So I think he's just like, God, please, how can I possibly beat Jacksonville and have another year in Tennessee?
Sure. So Tennessee lost. If Houston somehow beats Jacksonville and Jacksonville loses, week 18, Jacksonville and Tennessee have the same record. Would that outcome matter? Oh wait, actually, yeah, it would matter because they have the same record. So the higher record will get the seed. Oh, sorry, that wasn't even my question. I don't know why that question turned there. So Jacksonville wins this week. Jacksonville has the higher record. If Tennessee loses, if Tennessee beats Jacksonville, they'll have the same record. Would Jacksonville still not? I mean, they would split the head-to-head tiebreaker. I guess it would come down to who has the more division wins, and I guess I think
that's why it's
that's probably Tennessee. So that would make sense. Week. Okay, yeah, I just working out some playoff scenarios here, but not much from the Titans there. I mean, good luck if you're starting a Titan who's not Derrick Henry. That's all I got to say, pretty much.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's jump into it, Wes. Our final finale of studs and duds for the fantasy football season.
The last one.
2022 season. We've been correct on every single one of these this year. We have never been wrong. And we'll cap that statement off with the perfect final studs and duds. Wes, stud for week 17 championship weekend. Who is it?
All right. Well, as we talked about last time, trying to get some studs and duds. Noah and I are going to give you players that you actually are questioning, because I'm not just going to say, hey, remember how Justin Jefferson had 180 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Packers and he's playing them again? You should start Justin Jefferson. Well, of course. I mean,
that is monumental information.
Yeah. Just a reminder, he balled out against them. But Noah and I are trying to do the dirty work to help with some people you're actually questioning. And just for some fun, Noah and I actually have no idea who our studs and duds are. So this is real-time reaction. So my stud is going to be Cam Akers.
Oh my
running back for the Los Angeles Rams. Here's the thing. For whatever reason, Cam Akers has been pretty good as of late. And I don't think it's actually that big of a fluke that Cam Akers had 3 touchdowns against the Broncos defense. Games can be crazy. Any given Sunday, it's possible that something like that can happen. But there has been a strange relationship with Cam Akers and Sean McVay this season, and it was weird and confusing, and it was worth dropping Cam Akers during the middle of the week 1 opener against the Bills. People were just quitting on him. Well, then Darrell Henderson was waived out of nowhere, even though he was waived as the current rushing leader for the Rams. They just decided, yeah, that's it for Darrell Henderson. You just move along now. And Cam Akers has been there, and he's actually done pretty well. And I think if you have Cam Akers and you really are on the fence for a flex option, maybe even if you're just trying to figure out which running back to start, Cam Akers is playing the Chargers, who are the 28th worst rush defense in the fantasy football world. They are tied for fifth most rushing touchdowns and tied for fifth most receiving touchdowns by running backs. They've also allowed the second most rushing yards all season. So if Cam Akers can put up 3 touchdowns against a very stout Broncos defense, I'm not saying he's going to do that again, but I have very, very strong confidence that Cam Akers is going to have a successful day for you. Possibly, if you made the championship with Cam Akers, you're incredible. And I think you should ride it to the end. I think you should see how Cam Akers is going to win you a crown potentially from a wonderful performance against the Chargers. So he's my stud. I think it's worth lining him up for your fantasy week for the championship, dude. Cam Akers, bro.
Cam Akers and Sean McVay have a weird relationship.
Yeah, I do.
It's like the nerdy guy at the bar is Sean McVay, and Cam Akers is like the hot girl at the bar. And they've been like Sean McVay's been like looking at her the whole time and is like, I have so many plans here, but nothing's gonna happen because I'm gonna take the advice of some dumb friends and play this out how it shouldn't go, and then maybe I'll score. Who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen? And he was playing it out all season, and then last week he scored and he got the number. And anyone who's ever tried to make a move on a hot girl or a hot guy at a bar after you get the number goes one of 2 ways. It goes great, or you crash and burn.
Oh,
and I think Sean McVay's scoring again, baby. I don't know. I feel it. I feel it in my bones.
Right?
It's the Chargers' run defense is so bad. And I think McVay went, okay, whatever. We don't really have anything to lose here. Why not just keep doing what works?
Exactly.
And like we said, Bosa might be back, but also he might not. And I tend to think whenever they designate the players to come back from IR, they probably actually won't end up coming back. I don't think the Chargers can play for anything here. I don't think they can move up in seeding in the playoffs. And so I think it was probably like, hey, let's open up this 21-day window. He can come back. He can start practicing. We can see how he's feeling. And then we'll be in the playoffs. So he'll be back for the wild card game, whatever it is. But all that being said, I love it. You said Cam Akers and my head sank and my heart sank, but then you got me back into it, Wes. And, I kind of love this just resurgence of the Rams for no reason at all. Like they don't have a pick anyways. So the only reason is to just like screw the Lions. Like essentially they're just like, yeah, Lions thought they were going to have a top 3 pick. And John McVay is like, oh, I'll stick it to you, Jared Goff, whatever. Like one last kick in the nuts as on your way out or whatever. But I kind of love it. I kind of love just that the Rams are, and you know me and my hatred towards Baker Mayfield, but I kind of love the story, man. I don't know what it is about it, but it's just like, yeah, Baker's just getting kicked around, and why not? You go play for the Rams, and it's like, oh, 50 burger on the Broncos defense. It's just, I love it. I love it. Sean McVay's scoring, and so is Cam Akers. Cam Akers is I think he's a great candidate for a Week 17 stud, and I want somebody to play him in the championship game.
Yeah, I want to see it. The Rams are just playing for themselves, and I think that was what they missed all season. As I think they thought, I felt like it wasn't so much of a football hangover or a Super Bowl hangover, but more the fact that they thought it would be easy again. And they were 2-1, and then they just were like not, they didn't have a winning record, or maybe like 3-2 at one point, and then they haven't had a winning record since. And then finally, when it was too late, they decided to play for themselves, and they've been crushing it. And I think it's fun. And I think Cam Akers is worth starting. Not Mayfield, though. But Cam Akers, I think, is going to be a great stud. Hey, Noah, it's time for you to share who your last stud of the fantasy football season is.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think this is going to help a lot of people. I think it's going to help a lot of people because you may have been riding it out here with Tua, and Tua may have been helping you get to a fantasy championship. You may have been running out with Jalen Hurts, and he may have helped you get to a fantasy championship. That could have been the case. You could have maybe had Kyler Murray early on, and he helped you get to a fantasy championship, and you've just been streaming quarterbacks trying to figure out what you're going to do. Imagine streaming quarterbacks in the fantasy football playoffs. I mean, you're playing a dangerous game there, but I'm here to tell you today that Aaron Rodgers is a week 17 stud against the Minnesota Vikings. Yeah, I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers, who had 3 points against Minnesota Vikings in week 1. That's who I'm talking about. You know why? Because as we've seen, after maybe we thought something was going to be a certain way in week 1, the Minnesota Vikings pass defense isn't good. They're not good at football. They're not good at defending the pass. They're not good. They are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this year, and quarterbacks are averaging 40 pass attempts per game against the Vikings over the last 11 weeks. Let me add another piece onto that for you. 9 of the last 11 quarterbacks to face the Vikings have scored at least 17 fantasy points in those matchups. The only 2 that didn't hit that mark, you may ask, Matt Ryan, who's been benched, and you guessed it, Taylor Heineke, who's been benched. So pretty much being a starting quarterback in the NFL is the only benchmark or criteria you need to meet for fantasy football success as a quarterback against the Vikings. Listen, if you're one of those people who have lost a quarterback for your team and you are scrambling, you're needing to figure something out, Trevor Lawrence, my goodness, he should not be on the waiver wire. He should be gone. Kirk Cousins should be off your waiver wire. Daniel Jones should be off your waiver wire. They should not be there. If those guys are, great, go for it. But if they are not, I'm here to tell you, look no further, because a must-win out Aaron Rodgers may be the guy to win you a fantasy football championship this week against a very poor Minnesota Vikings pass defense. Aaron Rodgers, fantasy football championship week 17 stud. Book it. Book it, baby.
You're telling me that if I start Aaron Rodgers in the championship, I can RELAX?
Oh, yeah, baby. Oh, yeah.
Dude, it's so funny to think how, so I mean, in a way similar to Cam Akers, but just especially with Aaron Rodgers, start of the season, it was like, hey, this is going to be rough for him without Devontae Adams. And then it was, oh my gosh, I could just drop Aaron Rodgers. I got to find a better quarterback. I can't win with him. And just the last few games, it's just turned around in some, you know how like Brady just gets away with victories for no reason, it just keeps ending up. And like this is happening to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers at this very moment. It's like all of a sudden they're like on a 4-game winning streak. Every single team they needed to lose for Christmas weekend in order to stay alive, they all lost, and they beat the Dolphins. And now here they are. Really, I mean, it's just all going their way. And I think Aaron Rodgers is kind of a hot hand to roll with. Now, I mean, we'll remember that Christian Watson is probably not going to play. But again, you can have a crap ton of yards because the Vikings defense just allows huge plays. I mean, if you've watched the Vikings game, which you probably have because, oh my gosh, so many of their games have been incredible all season long. They allow a lot of big plays, and Rodgers is one of the best at big plays. So, oh, I love it. Discount, double check it. I'm all for it, baby. Aaron Rodgers.
I still own you. Exactly. Yeah, there we go. Wes, Tell me who I should not even think about playing in my lineup in week 17. Give me your week 17 championship weekend dud.
This one's tough because I've liked him for a lot of the season, but I'm going to explain why I think Raheem Mostert is a dud for this championship week. So there's a new question mark now with the Dolphins offense. They've just lost 4 in a row. Not only are we asking who can we trust among what was once arguably the best offense in the NFL, but now we're asking what's changed and what will change with Teddy Bridgewater as the starting quarterback. Raheem Mostert has been really hot and cold this season. He's left a lot of fantasy owners confused. Should I start him? Should I stick with Jeff Wilson? Who is the right option? And it got especially confusing looking literally just the last 2 games. Talk about hot and then very cold. He was hot against Buffalo. He rushed for over 100 yards in just the first quarter. And then the very next week against Green Bay, he doesn't even get 50 yards total and finishes with less than 5 points. So I'm going to help give a little bit of clarity on why Raheem Mostert is going to be cold and he's going to be a dud for this week. So first of all, they're playing the New England Patriots. They are the second best rush defense in the NFL. They've allowed the 7th fewest rushing yards total and the least amount of rushing touchdowns in the NFL. They've only allowed 3 all season. Cam Akers did that in 1 game. That's why he's my stud. No, but they only allow 3 all season. On top of that, they have only allowed 1 receiving touchdown to running back all game, all season long. So you take a look at that and how the Dolphins and the Patriots did in week 1. Raheem Mostert had 5 carries for 16 yards, finished with 4.2 points. That's before Jeff Wilson even arrived. And I know Raheem Mostert hadn't really kicked into gear, but the Patriots defense is better than it was in those first few games. So second of all, how will Teddy Bridgewater affect this offense? Well, let's just look at what he did in a complete game, week 6 against that Minnesota Vikings. Hey, guess what Noah just talked about with Minnesota Vikings passing defense? Okay, I'll tell you again. First of all, the Dolphins only rushed 20 times. Mostert carried the ball 14 times for 49 yards. Meanwhile, just as Noah said, Teddy Bridgewater went 23 for 34, 329 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 2 picks as well. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they had themselves a day. Jalen Waddle had 129 yards. Tyreek Hill had 177 yards. This Dolphins offense, as much as Mike McDaniel wants this to include a ground game, they still have one of the most prolific passing games because they have the 2 best wide receivers in the NFL. So you take the second best rush defense in the NFL, you pair that with a quarterback that threw 300 yards, and now they're going up against the 10th worst passing defense. That's right. The Patriots have the 10th worst passing defense in fantasy. That will equal Raheem Mostert as your final dud of the season.
Wow. I'm inspired. I'm saddened because I love Raheem Mostert. All in all, I feel as though I'm with you, Wes. I'm riding out with you. I think this is probably the correct way people need to be going here. I think this is going to be a pretty pass heavy, pretty pass heavy kind of game for Miami. I think this scheme, and if we do run it, if the Dolphins do run the football, there's 2 very capable running backs to do this, and it's Raheem Mostert and it's Jeff Wilson. It's going to be tough to predict which one is going to give the upper hand here, and so I think, I'm with you, Wes. I think this is probably the right move here. I think sadly, Raheem Mostert is a fantasy championship weekend, week 17 dud.
It is tough because he has been solid and has helped a lot of teams out. But I think when you are on the fence with someone like Raheem Mostert, you just kind of need to look at some of the analytics. And them's the maths, baby. That's just what it says. Second best rush defense in the NFL, 10th worst pass defense in the NFL. He's been hot and cold. And Teddy Bridgewater is probably, if I'm just going to speculate a little bit more, I think Teddy Bridgewater is going to probably have an offensive coordinator that's going to scheme a pass first offense to get him ready, because it's very likely that Teddy Bridgewater is going to be the quarterback for the Dolphins the rest of this 2022 season, knowing that Tua is in a third concussion protocol. That is a possibility. It's also, when you have a running back that has been hot and cold, are you willing to bank on that for the championship? I mean, I get it. There's people like Devonta Smith and Mike Williams, but you also can trust their floor much better than you can with Raheem Mostert, that is just kind of lacked. And so is the Dolphins offense. They've just kind of lacked as of lately. So just trying to give a little bit of, here's some statistics to help you make that decision more clear. That being said, Noah, this is it. This is the final. This is the end of our studs and duds segment for the entire season. Help us win a championship. Tell us who to bench, and let's be smart about it, huh? Who's your dud?
I'm going to cry because, this is the last one. And I'm also going to cry because Zay Jones is my dud this week in the fantasy football championship. Oh, boy, the fantasy playoffs have been a roller coaster for Zay Jones. 34.9 fantasy points, just to follow it up with 2.1 fantasy points. I'm here to say that it's not time to get cute and play potentially the waiver wire ad of the year, Zay Jones, in your starting lineup for the fantasy football championship. Listen, somehow when we talk about this Texans team, this is the stats that come up, but the Texans are allowing the fewest receptions and receiving touchdowns to wide receivers this season, as well as allowing the third fewest fantasy points to wide receivers this year. You want to know why? Because everyone just runs against them. Nobody needs to throw the ball. The Houston Texans run defense is terrible. So everyone just runs the football against them. Sorry, did I say run defense or pass defense right there?
I don't remember specifically what you said, but what you said so far is that they have basically the worst rush defense because they have a really good pass defense.
I just want to emphasize that. The passing defense stats for the Houston Texans are measured because the Houston Texans cannot stop the run. They cannot stop people from running the football. People run all over them. Their run defense is terrible. Now, let's piece that information together with the fact that Zay Jones is averaging just 5.9 fantasy points per game in games where he sees fewer than 8 targets. Sadly, I don't think we're in line for one of those games this week. So I hate to say it, but the flame has gone out on the Zay Jones fire for this season of fantasy football. He is my week 17 dud.
You bring clarity the way that we are all hoping to find clarity with studs and duds, because it is, I think, a big question mark. Will we get a 34-point Zay Jones performance, or will we get a 2-point performance from Zay Jones? And again, that's what we need to know. Just because I'm bummed. I'm bummed that that's the case, because I do want to.
Me too. I love Zay Jones.
Yeah, but it is a really good. It brings great clarity on what the Texans defense is actually like, because when you think about the Texans just barely winning their second game of the season, you think, oh, they have a terrible defense. Half of their defense is terrible. The other half is really good. And I mean, you watch what they did against the Eagles. You saw what they did against the Cowboys. You saw what they done against the Chiefs too. I think Dak had like 2 or 3 interceptions. Oh my gosh. Quick story time, and then we'll wrap up the episode. Noah and I, on our way to go watch the Dolphins Chargers game, we stopped by at a restaurant to just enjoy the first game window. And, we live in America, so there's a Cowboy fan anywhere you go. And this one guy, he's just sitting by himself having wings, and he's watching He's watching the Cowboys play the Texans. And if you remember that game, it was close. This dude was screaming so loud and just swearing by himself, slamming the table. He was having the worst time because that Texans defense was stopping Dak Prescott consistently with turnovers and sacks. They're much better than their record is, especially now. So I think just having that kind of hard set in stone statistic about, hey, the rush defense is abysmal, which is great because I have a Travis Etienne. That's great.
There you go.
But their pass defense, yeah. Thanks for just saying what we couldn't say, Noah.
Yeah, I know it's hard. It's tough. We all love Zay Jones. If anything, the Zay Jones experiment has again, I'll say it again, just has made me more excited for Calvin Ridley to be on this offense next year. So it's going to be a fun time. But Zay Jones, dud this fantasy football championship weekend, week 17. That is going to be all the time that we do have for this episode. Wherever you are listening, we'd appreciate it if you gave the episode 5 stars and write something funny in the review so we can give you a shout out next time. We're on social media everywhere at 4th and Troll and on Facebook at 4th and Troll Fantasy. Look for our mascot, Teddy the Troll, and make him smile by giving us a follow and joining us next time every Tuesday and Friday. I'm Noah Selby.
And I'm Wes Selby.
Good luck on this championship weekend in fantasy football. And this has been 4th and Troll Fantasy.